Hello friends and welcome to the lecture. So students, as we know that we are covering the parliament, okay? And basically these are the topics that we have scheduled for the discussion under this particular series. Like starting with the introduction part, organization of parliament, composition of two houses, system of elections to Lok Sabha, duration of two houses, the membership of parliament, presiding officers of parliament, leaders in parliament, sessions of parliament, devices of parliamentary proceedings, legislative procedure in parliament, joint sitting of two houses, and the budget in parliament. Okay, so total 13 topics we have covered so far out of these 18 topics. And if we talk about the topic on which we have been discussing right now, so it is the multifunctional role of the parliament. Okay, and the topics that we are left with are the ineffectiveness of the parliamentary control, the position of Rajya Sabha, the parliamentary privileges, and the sovereignty of power. Okay, so you can say that this is the picture that we have created so far altogether. So basically in this lecture, we will start from where we had left in the previous one. Okay, so basically you can say, all right, okay. So basically in the previous lecture, we had started with the multifunctional role, all right, and we had discussed these 7 rules and the powers which have been given to the parliament by the Constitution of India. And these powers are like legislative and the legislative powers and functions, executive powers and functions, financial powers and functions, constituent powers and functions, judicial powers and functions, electoral powers and functions, others powers and functions. Okay. And then we had started the discussion over the legislative powers and functions, and we had discussed that basically the parliament having the exclusive power to make the laws on the subjects which were enumerated in the union list. I had told you the concept of these lists were started from the Government of India Act 1995. On that time, that was known as the federal list, but after the independence, we removed the word federal from the constitution. That's why we use union list right now. We had discussed that presently it had 98 subjects. Originally, there were 97 subjects. And the residuary subjects are those subjects which are not mentioned in any list, which means a union list, state list, or concurrent list. Okay. Thereafter, we had discussed about the concurrent list, which has at present 52 subjects. Originally, there were 47 subjects. And then we had discussed that basically the parliament having the overriding powers. It means that if both the parliament and the state legislature makes the laws, okay, on certain thing, and if there is contradiction between the laws, so always the preference would be given automatically to the parliamentary laws. Okay. Thereafter, we had discussed that the constitution provides a parliament to make the laws even on the state subjects in these 5 conditions. First, if the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution. Second, if a proclamation of national emergency is in operation. Third, if 2 or more states makes a joint request to the parliament. Fourth, when you can say when necessary to give effect to international agreement, treaties, and conventional. And then last, when president rule is in operation in the state. Okay. So during these 5 extraordinary situations or the abnormal circumstances, basically the parliament, which is entitled to make the laws on the union list and the residuary laws, they could even make the laws on the state list. Okay. So here we have done a little bit revision of the previous thing. Now let's move forward. So basically, here there is the one thing, like all the ordinances issued by the president. Remember the president having the 8 type of powers. We will discuss it while we will having a discussion over the president. Then we will discuss this. And one of these 8 powers is the ordinance making powers, which means the president could make the ordinance and could pass the ordinance. So all the ordinances which are issued by the president, and the president could issue the ordinances during the recess of the parliament, which means when the parliament is not in the session. When the parliament is not in the session and there is a recession of the parliament, then the president could issue the ordinances. and these ordinances must be approved by the parliament within 6 weeks after its reassembly. Okay, it means that the parliament was not in the session. Okay, let's take an example. So suppose it is the monsoon session. We know the monsoon session starts from May to September. Okay, so during the September when the parliament will not in the session, and due to this, a certain condition arises in the month of October. Okay, so what will happen now? The president will have the power that he could pass the resolution. Okay, he could pass the resolution and the ordinance because the parliament is not in the session, so that no law could be made on certain thing. But in the winter session, which means November to December, when the parliament will reassemble, so they will get a tenure of 6 weeks. Okay, it means that 1 month and 2 weeks, so that the ordinance which had been made by the president during their absence, this must be continued. Okay, so remember this, and always remember the ordinance which had been passed by the president during the tenure when the parliament was not in the session. Okay, this ordinance will become inoperative if it is not approved by the parliament within that period. Okay, it means that the parliament is required to approve it within the 6 weeks. If the parliament fails to do, and you can say the parliament willingly not approve the ordinance, then the ordinance will no longer exist. Thereafter, we can say the parliament makes laws in a skeleton form and authorizes the executive to make detailed rules and regulations within the framework of the parent law. Which means basically the parliament gives the provisions, certain provisions and things. Okay, then the executives who are required to implement these provisions and things, they are set free that they will make the detailing, or you can say they will detail the rules and regulations, but within the framework of the parent law. It means that they are allowed to make the modifications, make the innovations, okay, because they are the one who is going to implement them. But remember, the framework of the parent law should not violate it. Okay, the framework of the parent law must be continued as it is. This is known as the delegated legislation or executive legislation or subordinate legislation. Okay, delegated means the authority of making rules and regulations which had been granted the legislation. This authority delegated to the executive. Here you can say parliament only provides the skeleton law. Parliament is a legislation. Okay. Then the executives who are entitled to implement that particular law, they will make the detailed rules and regulations. Okay. So it means the authority has been delegated to the legislation by the parliament. First thing. Second, executive legislation. Why? Because the executives are making the laws. Subordinate legislation means like the parent law, and you can say the basic outfit of that particular law that would be made by the parliament itself. It means that the provisions would be decided by the parliament. Only the modification, innovation, and some minor adjustment will be done by the executive. Okay, that's why it is known as a subordinate legislation. Okay, remember, such rules and regulations are placed before the parliaments for its examination. It means that suppose the parliament had made only a draft. Okay, then this draft given to the executive, then the executive made a laws on it. Okay, so this is the situation. So that particular thing, you can say that particular law would be placed before the parliament for the examinations, like whether the executive changed the principles or whether the executive exercise the arbitrary powers and not, and whether the law which had been modified by the executive, this is accordance with the constitution or not, and this is accordance with the objectives of that particular law. Okay, so these things would be examined by the parliament. All right. After this, legislative powers. Another one is the executive powers and the functions. So if we talk about it, we can say basically the Constitution of India established a parliamentary form of government. Yes, we had discussed it. And from where we had borrowed it, we had borrowed the system from the British Constitution. Okay. So in India, we have the parliamentary form of government in which the executive is responsible to the parliament for its policies and okay. Like we had discussed also, basically informal, there are two types of things, parliamentary form and the presidential form. So the parliamentary form is the form in which the executives are responsible for the legislation for the parliament, here in the case of India. In the presidential form, the executives are separated and they are not responsible towards the legislation. Okay, so basically means there is no relation between the executives and the legislation part. But because we are in the parliamentary form, where the executives are responsible for the legislation, so this would be happen in India also. Okay, it means whatsoever the policies and acts the executives will decide, they are responsible for the parliament to review their policies and okay. Hence, the parliament exercises the control over the executives through questioning hours, in which they ask the questions, and we know the questions are of three types: stayed, unstayed, and the short notice. Stayed questions are those questions which could be asked okay directly, and the answer could be given orally. So the supplementary questions are allowed. Okay. Unstayed questions are those questions which could be asked, but the answer could not be given orally. All right. The answer is only given by the writing. So because of this, the supplementary question is not allowed. In short notice question, basically the prior notice of 14 days must be given to the minister, okay, and the executive to whom the question is going to be asked. All right. This is the thing. After this, we know there is a 0 hour. What does it mean? 0 hour just comes after the questioning hour. In this, various topics discuss, okay, which are of the public importance. After this, the half an hour discussion. It means if something was remaining, you can say something was there, all right, and the thing is of the great public importance, all right, and the thing was not mentioned in the usual, you can say the ongoing of the parliament sessions. Then the half an hour would be allotted for the discussion of it. Short duration discussion. It means if the thing is to be discussed shortly. Calling attention motion. If the member wants the house to look on some important public matter, then this could be passed. Adjournment motion to you can say stop the proceedings. No confidence motion to prove that the sitting party and you can say the ruling party has lost their majority. Censor motion and other discussions are there. All right. It means the parliamentary members could directly make the executive responsible for their acts and policies. All right. Thus, the parliament having the control over that. The parliament of the executive with the help of the committees, like the Committee on Government Assurance, Committee on Subordinate Legislation, and the Committee on Petitions, etc. Okay, it means that not only they having the different parliamentary tools, but also they having the dedicated committees on certain matters through which they could exercise the control over the executives. After this, ministers are collectively responsible to the parliament in general and to the Lok Sabha in particular. Okay, ministers are the executives. All right. So in the general, they are responsible to the legislation or the parliament. But if we talk about the specific or the particular, then they are basically responsible for the Lok Sabha. Okay. Why? Because if we talk about the ruling party, generally it belongs to the Lok Sabha, or you can say particularly it belongs to the Lok Sabha. They having their council there. All right. So that's why the council of ministers present in the Lok Sabha. So that's why they are collectively responsible for the Lok Sabha in particular and parliament in general. Why? Because the Lok Sabha is the part of the parliament. All right. And then, as a part of the collective responsibility, all right, as a part of the collective responsibility, there is individual responsibility also. What does it mean? That is, each minister is individually responsible for the efficient administration of the ministry under his charge. Okay, like if we take the example of the aviation minister or the minister of aviation, all right. So the minister of aviation or the aviation minister, basically he will be the part of council of minister. Collectively, they are responsible. Okay, if the entire council has been charged, so in such a case, he is collectively responsible. But instead of the entire council, if the matter revolves around his council, or you can say his ministry, then instead of the collective responsibility, he would be individually responsible to answer the query. It means if the query was, you can say, against the aviation ministry, then no other minister and no other ministry could answer the query. The query to whom is asked, the one will explain. Got it? This means that they continue in office so long as they enjoy the confidence of the majority members in the Lok Sabha. Like if the aviation minister fails to explain nothing, all right, and the majority members in the Lok Sabha votes against him, then he will lose the majority. Okay, and we know in India there is a majority party rule. So once the majority loses, the person would be taken out of the office immediately. Okay. In other words, Council of Ministers can be removed from office by the Lok Sabha by passing a no confidence motion. As we had discussed, that this no confidence motion basically passed to shows that the current ruling party has lost its majority. Okay. Thereafter, the another thing that we can see here is that the Lok Sabha can also express the lack of confidence in the government in the following ways. Apart from the non-confidence motion, by not passing a motion of thanks on the president's inaugural address, okay, by rejecting a money bill, by passing a censure motion or an urgent motion, by defeating a government on a vital issue, by passing a cut motion. All right, like these are the other ways other than the no confidence motion by which the Lok Sabha could show that they having lack of confidence in the government and the ruling party. And if this successfully shows it, then the ruling party will brought for the resignation, because we had discussed many times the India having the majority party. Once the majority is gone, the party is to be resigned. Okay. Therefore, the first function of the parliament can be said to be to select the group which is to form the government. Okay, support and sustain it in power so long as it enjoys its confidence. Okay, like group here reflects the political party. Like which political party should be move ahead to form the government. Okay, and how it will decide? It will decide that which political party succeeded in ensuring the majority in the parliament. Okay. Thereafter, once the government is formed, there must be a continuous support from the parliament to the government. Okay. That will ensure their majority. And if the government enjoys the majority, then what will happen? They will sustain it. And the majority comes from the confidence in the government and its policies. All right. And to expel it when it ceases to do, and leave it to the people to decide at the next general election. Okay. Like we know, there is a certain fixed time period for the Lok Sabha, 5 years. So once the 5 years tenure would complete, then people of India would decide in the general elections that which political party they want to choose as the next government. All right. After this, another thing that we have is the financial powers and functions. Okay. What are these? First is no tax can be levied or collected, and no expenditure can be incurred by the executive except under the authority and with the approval of Parliament. Okay, it means that the executive by their own could not leave and collected any tax. All right, and even without the authority and the approval of the Parliament, they could not withdraw any particular amount from the funds and the reserves. Okay, that will ensure the executives will be disciplined and they should not use their arbitrary powers. Okay, hence that's why whatsoever need of the funds the executive have, okay, whatsoever tax rates they want to decide, all these things were first mentioned in the document. That is what we call a budget. Okay, then these details which have been drafted in the budgets, these will be placed before the parliaments for its approval. Okay, like in the budget, when the government shows the estimation expenditure, they mention that this particular executive or the minister will get this much of amount. Okay, that particular department will get this much of amount. That particular project carrying on by this executive will get that much of amount. Entire things are mentioned in the budget. Against it, what will be the profit and what will be the benefit of the country would be happen from this, that is mentioned on the other side. Okay, then the discussion and the voting and the examination also happens in the parliament, and if the provisions which were presented in the budget successfully pass, then they would have the parliamentary approval. So the enactment of the budget by the parliament legalizes receipts and expenditure of the government for the ensuing financial year. Ensuing means upcoming financial year, because remember, once the financial year started, budget will never be presented. Remember it. Okay, it means that if the budget is to be presented for the financial year 2024, then the budget would come in March 2024. Why? Because it will be the end of the financial year 2023. It means before ending on one particular financial year, the budget must be presented and must be passed. Okay, so that the functionality failure could be avoided. After this, the parliament also scrutinizes government spending and the financial performance, okay, with the help of its financial committees. The parliament also scrutinizes government spending and financial performance with the help of its financial committees. All right, remember this. This includes the Public Accounts Committee, Estimates Committee, and the Committee on Public Undertakings. Okay, and these will bring out the cases of illegal, irregular, unauthorized, improper usage and wastage and extravagance in the public expenditure. Okay, it means that whatsoever the estimation of the expenditure the government will present through the budget, that is subjected for the review by the Public Accounts Committee, the Estimates Committee, and the Committees of Public Undertaking, so that they could go through it thoroughly and they could bring out if any illegal case is there, if any irregular expenditure is there, if any unauthorized expenditure is there, if any improper usage was there, if any wastage was there, and if any extravagance in public expenditure was noticed. Okay. After this, therefore, the parliamentary control over the executive in the financial matters operates in two stages. Okay, like we know, the parliament exercises the controls over the executive. That is what we know. Okay, in the financial matters, if we talk about, then it is basically operates in the two stages. All right, and what are these two stages? The first stage is the budgetary control. That is control before the appropriation of grants through the enactment of the budget. Okay, It means whatsoever the executives demanded, these are subjected for the discussion in the parliament, voting in the parliament, and thus approval of the parliament. Once the amount, you can say, given to the executive, it means once the budgetary controls over, okay, then comes the post budgetary controls. What are this? So it is the control after the appropriation of grants through the three financial committees. Okay, it means that now this is a situation when the fund is not allotted before the appropriation of grants. It is the condition after the appropriation of grants. In the first condition, we know whatsoever the estimation the government is presenting. These estimations would be discussed, put for voting, cut motions could be passed and all. Okay, so this is the enactment of the appropriation. Once the funding allotted, it means once the fund has been given, then what will happen? Basically, after the appropriation of grants, there are three financial committees that will ensure the parliamentary control over the executive. Okay, so we know three committees are public account undertakings, estimated committees, and then the other committee. The budget is based on the principle of annuity, that is, the parliament transfers money to the government for one financial year. Okay, annuity means 1 year. It means that if the ruling party has elected for the 5 years, so it means they could not present the budget for 5 years regularly. Why? Because the things are dynamic. So might be there a possibility whatsoever conditions of the market, the economy, nation in 2023 were there. This is not necessary. The same conditions will be here in the 2024 also. That is not possible from anywhere. So that's why there is a principle of annuity. It means the budget will be only for 1 year so that it could deal with the dynamic situations effectively. If the granted money is not spent by the end of the financial year, okay, which means suppose that 10,000 crores have been granted to the XYZ administration. Out of this, they were able to utilize 8,000 only. Okay, it means that 2,000 crores are remaining. So if the granted money, which is in this case 10,000 crores, they are not spent by the end of the financial year. Okay, which means then the balance expires and returns to the Constituent Fund of India. Okay, so you can say if 10,000 crores were allotted, 8,000 crores were utilized, the remaining 2,000 crores were not utilized. So these 2,000 crores will not, these 2,000 crores would be returned back to the Constituent Fund of India. Okay, and then in the next year they would be put for the budget sessions and then they would be granted. Okay, so students, basically in this lecture we have finished it here. In the next lecture we would continue from here. Till then, just revise the facts and figures that all we have discussed in this lecture. Be ready for the another lecture. With this note, let's end this lecture, and what we say thank you.